I think the scariest bit about this story is the fact that life is so fleeting. In an instant, you can be going about your day and then that's it. Poof, it's over. This is the sad and tragic story of a freak accident and a suicide that forever changed the lives of two families. On Sunday, April 25th, 2021, Taylor Kahle and her date had dinner at Basic Barn Pizza. She was there on a second date. She had just met him and she really started to like him. Basic Barn Pizza was her favorite restaurant, and it was just a normal day, lovely date. They talked, had a few beers. Less than an hour later, she would be killed by Christian Anders, the 18-year-old young man who took his life. Basic surveillance cameras show that Kahle and her date were leaving the restaurant with leftovers in hand at 7:21 p.m. That followed by a second video showing them crossing the street with Kahle's date walking just slightly ahead of her. They are followed by another couple. After a moment, this second couple begins crossing the street, and then the two of them suddenly stop dead in their tracks. That morning, Christian called his mother, Veronica. He wanted to tell me that he loves me and that he couldn't be here anymore. That the voices are just becoming too much. I said, Christian, you know we can get you help. We can get through this. It kind of sounded like he was at a trolley station. He didn't drive. He took the trolley bus. And then I said, why don't you just come to meet us? My friend and I were at the swap meet, and he loved the swap meet. He had said, oh, that'd be nice. But then he called me back and said, Mom, I'm not coming. I'm just going to go home. I went to his house later, but his phone was off. This was still in the morning. I started to panic. His phone was never off. I just knew something wasn't good. Christian's mother looked for him for hours before the crisis center recommended she call PERT, which is the Psychiatric Emergency Response Team. After speaking to his roommates, Veronica was told that they had just seen him, so she called the police to let them know. A decision she now regrets as she feels the police stopped looking for him after that point. The scene of the accident was super chaotic, as you can imagine. Crowds of people standing around looking at the victims, who were referred to by the paramedics as Patient 1 and 2. The paramedics quickly realized that the person they identified as Patient 1 would not be savable. But Patient 2, the unidentified male, still had a heart rhythm. After a few rounds of CPR, he was stable enough to be loaded up for transport. Imagine someone like you and me. Well, I can only speak for me, but seeing something like that on your normal day, walking your dog, coming out of the pizza shop, and seeing that happen right in front of your eyes, that had to be so traumatizing and jarring. But then it kind of goes into why people like gore, why they're interested in seeing things like that. If you're interested in that conversation, I actually did a video about why people enjoy or flock to gore. You can see that either in the suggestion box or I'll put it somewhere in this video. Anyway, Patient 2, which was Christian Anders, died at 8:16 p.m., 53 minutes after he jumped, and he wouldn't be identified for 3 days. Due to him not having any ID on him, his fingerprints awaited to be processed. That night at 11:15, police arrive at the residence of Taylor's father, Kent Kahle. They tell Kent that his daughter has been killed in a freak accident. Kent also said, I'm a news junkie. Well, one section of the paper is all traffic accidents and people dying. I always read about motorcyclists because I ride myself and I'm interested. So, you read it and go, oh, that's tragic. But it's always somebody else. Some family member is hurting because they lost their family or spouse. But you turn the page and move on. But this time, it didn't happen to somebody else, it happened to my daughter. All of a sudden, that person you read about in the paper isn't somebody else. It was my daughter. It's just surreal. Sadly, Veronica wasn't able to have her closure for another 2 days. She remembered being told about a man who jumped from the 9th floor of a parking garage, but it reported a 30-year-old man, not an 18-year-old man. She didn't put them together, or she didn't want to. Tuesday, she filed the missing persons report. I'm not sure what happened, if there was some kind of confusion. She says she didn't know that she could file one up until that point. I don't know, you know how people say that you have to be missing for a certain amount of time to be able to file a missing person report and to be considered missing? I don't know, I'm not a fucking lawyer. Anyway, only after Christian's aunt started calling the local hospitals was he found. Still, until the morning of the day he jumped, Anders had never shown any signs of feeling suicidal, and he had never made any previous attempts, says his mother. When he first told her that he heard voices, he said that they were comforting spirit guides, showing him the way through a loving life, sending messages of manifestation and abundance. And she didn't think much of it. It wasn't until his mother found out that her son had given away $800 of his rent money to strangers in downtown San Diego that she began to worry about his judgment. He had told me, "Mom, they needed it more than I did." I couldn't even say anything. I didn't know how to process it. He said, "Whatever I give, I'll get back. If I give it out, it'll come back to me." As a kid, Christian would give away his lunch money, and as a teen, he'd invited his mother to help him hand out water to homeless people downtown. It was instances like this that made distinguishing mental illness from movements of a good-natured soul so difficult, his mother explains. There's very spontaneous, impulsive moments, and he was just that kind of way. And that's what made him so fun. It was a piece of him, and that's why I was so scared for so long to put him on any type of medication. I didn't want him to lose that, his creative, sweet, energetic self, she's quoted as saying. But soon after he turned 18, she says, a darkness set in the form of delusions and paranoia around the notions of a roommate being out to get him and gangs chasing him. His mother recalls taking him to a birthday dinner last December where he just wasn't himself. His eyes looked different, and it was hard to know what was real or not at that time. But that night I dropped him off at his apartment and he called me at 2:30 a.m. saying, "Mom, you have to come get me. They're trying to kill me. They're circling me and keep driving around the block." Everybody's having a really difficult time with dealing with this. Taylor's father says that he's really had to go to therapy for it, for obvious reasons, but part of what he struggles with is the improbability of it all. It kind of shot him into an existential crisis. He says this thing, it's like getting struck by lightning. Like, what are the chances? 1 in a million? Someone jumping off a building and landing on you? I just thought, why did God pick her? I looked back at my life and thought, in my whole life, how many close calls have I had? I mean, I've ridden a motorcycle my whole life. I've skydived in college. I've done a lot of dangerous things and probably had a lot of close calls, and yet here my daughter was just a week before her 30th birthday. This happened to her, and now all of a sudden she's gone. She mentioned having kids one day, and she said, "Dad, you know you're going to have to babysit," and I was like, absolutely. I was looking forward to that. And then, in a nanosecond, all of that is gone, just gone, poof. But even without therapy, Kent Kahle has found a measure of perspective that helps him going from one day to the next. I tell people that she was happy. She had all kinds of great girlfriends, a lot of friends, loved her job, loved her boss. The number of people that have come up to me from organizations that she worked with is just incredible. All of this adds up to the fact that she was just in a very good place when this happened. It was way too soon, but I like to say that she went on a high note. When her time came, as cruel as it is, we don't have answers. We don't know why that time was chosen for her. But I can honestly look back and say that, as her father, I don't have any regrets. About 3 months after her death, Kent received a letter from a person who received a tissue donation from Taylor, which freed that person from chronic pain and shoulder issues. Kent found this especially moving. So in a small but important way, a part of her is still alive and living on. It's actually a physical part, and that tugs at my heart, he said.